Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion 2 in the series of 4 panel discussion with faculty on techniques on virtual instruction at Kremen. So I'm so grateful for our guests today, Jessica, Nicole, Susan, and Masha, to join us and share their insights on how to promote active learning online among our students. That being said, we have like other faculties in the audience and who could not join us today, who also have a lot to share. So we really welcome, like interactive conversations among all the faculty. That being said, like our guests would share their ideas, and you audience, you feel free to interject, to ask questions, to add your thoughts and comments, and provide feedback or share, like thoughts on how the student react in your class, etc. So with that, I would, let's go ahead and get started with our guests on the topic of promote active online learning.
Okay, I'll begin.
Yeah.
I almost said good morning, but it's good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Trang. I'm going to just share 2 strategies that have been effective for me as I've been transitioning into the online environment. I did a little online with the doctoral program prior to the pandemic, so that was helpful. But this really, pushed me to have to think a little deeper for all the other courses I taught. So the 2 strategies that I wanted to identify that really promote that active learning and engagement in my classrooms are classroom mantras and classroom agreements. The reason I selected these strategies, I know there's a lot more strategies once you get the classroom going, but I really believe just setting that tone and really setting up your classroom right from the get-go is going to promote that true active learning. So one example is classroom mantras. And so for every one of my classrooms, we have a classroom mantra. And basically this is established so the students understand that the classroom is for them. It's not for me, it's for them. And I want to make sure that they get meaningful work, meaningful experiences and learning out of their classroom so they could actually go apply it to real life and make an impact. And so what we do when in discussion of classroom mantras is first, there's time allotted for each student to share their story and then share what they hope to gain from the classroom. And then collectively, we start thinking about some mantras that we want to adopt and then ultimately end up with the one mantra that is shown at the beginning of every classroom. This is an example, and I love Brene Brown. This is an example of one of my classes this semester, and this is the one that we decided, be here, be you, belong. This classroom belongs to you. And so at the beginning of every session, that is up, that is there. So the students are reminded that this is for them, not for me. And then the second strategy that I wanted to share are the development of classroom agreements.
Yeah.
This is really important because as a class, we're developing these clear learning expectations. And it's not just what I'm expecting from the students, but it's also what they are expecting from me. Again, to piggyback on the mantra, if this classroom is for them, then I need to make sure I set up the environment where I'm held accountable too for supporting them just as much as they are for being active learners. So the way that classroom agreements are designed, just to kind of give you a little mini version of classroom agreements, is they're divided into, I divide them up into 4 quadrants. So, and you could decide what you want to put in your quadrants, but for us, students respecting students, professor respecting students, student respecting professor, everyone respecting the environment and safe and space, sorry. The idea there is that we want to create a safe space where every student has their voice in the learning that we're doing. And what I do is I break them up and I have them start to reflect on these quadrants. And my only rule is that they need to be positively stated, meaning what we want to see rather than no, no, no to everything. And then we come back, we report, you know, what each of us have identified as is important to us for our agreement. And then if we have some similarities, we blend some together. We have some discussion about, you know, if there's something that someone has a question about, and then ultimately we vote on it as a class, and it becomes our living document. This is presented at the beginning of every course, and at the beginning of every course, again, we'll get consensus. You know, are we all good with the agreement? Is there anything we need to add, anything we need to adjust? And then we begin our class. So I just wanted to share 2 simple but very impactful strategies as you're starting to think about, you know, how do we get our students actually engaged and want to be part of this or be active learners in this process. And I strongly believe that's setting up that safe environment where they have voice and everybody is on the same page of what's expected.
Yeah, Jessica, this is so great. I love it. And I have so many questions, but I will start with 2. So first of all, I love Brené Brown as well. And when I think of her, I think about the daring leadership and vulnerability. So could you share with us, like when using the classroom mantras and to encourage the students' voice and choice and ownership, like do you get them to be open up, to be vulnerable and to really share, you know, like beyond their professional experience and so on. And by the way, so with that, which class level are you teaching, or are we referring to? And you think it will be helpful across levels? My second question is on your classroom in agreement. Did you go back as a group or as the whole class to revisit and to revise the agreement as the time goes?
Yes. Your first question, I've used this in all grade levels. So I'm talking like TK to high school, undergrad, grad, and doctoral level.
Yeah, right.
And it's been equally effective in all, because having clear, predictable structures and a safe environment where everyone is on the same page about what we're getting out of the classroom is really effective. Second, yes, we're constantly revisiting. Like I said, at the beginning of every class, we're revisiting the classroom agreement, but there's also opportunity if for some reason a student doesn't want to share whole class. There's also a process that we have developed for that. If they need to, you know, personally email or set up a meeting or need some assistance with addressing possibly an agreement that's been broken, we have that in place too.
So like you gave them a lot of options there. I'm also an option person. I like the different channels for the student to communicate.
And this always is evolving. You know, we're adapting based on, again, what the students need. And I think that's my main thing. And I'll leave you with this. I know we have some great speakers here with amazing additional strategies. But I think when students actually feel like their class is theirs, we are educating them to go out and make a difference. And it's not, like I said, it's not my classroom. It's our classroom. It's their classroom. And it just makes a huge difference in how they're engaged and how they communicate with you and how they start training, like you said, opening up and feeling to do so. They may have not done that the first class, but there's intentional opportunity for them to do that throughout, and we're building that trust.
Jessica, you have 2 questions on the chat.
Oh, okay.
Also, when you read that, I may add that I also use classroom agreement in my class, and since it's a project based, I have the each group develop and send me their group agreements, and I will review and give them feedback, and that they are hold accountable for what they put in the agreements.
Yeah, so I'll start with Kimberly's question real quick. I love Brene Brown's ideas, but that's just that's one set of mantras that I like to use. If for some reason the students are struggling with finding some, I'll give some ideas, and then I'll let them kind of come to consensus of what they feel is a mantra that they could really really relate to as a class. Now, the other question, I think Randy had a question for them. What do you do as an instructor? I'm going to be honest with you. This approach has been really effective, and I've been teaching as adjunct and faculty for almost 8 years now. I think just having that authentic and clarity at the beginning and really living what I preach. So if there is a discrepancy, adjusting based on their voice, I haven't had too much problems with that. Now, there have been times where I've had to have some one-on-one discussions with certain students and make sure that that we were back on the same page and I was listening to their voice, and they were also listening to some of the structures that were out of my control. Like for example, our students have some credentialing exams and some other credentialing requirements. That's not me, but it has to be, part of the work that we do.
Yeah. So Jessica, let me give an example and I want you to respond to it or tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. That's okay too.
Okay.
So my work is with lower track students, ones who have failed science because of lots of reasons that are structured, kind of baked into the system in public schools. So they get tracked in certain places. You are aware of the expectations and how this works out in school. So I know you know what I'm talking about. Absolutely. So what I want to establish in a classroom is oftentimes an ability to establish an argument where you put forth either hypotheses or conjectures, and you have to use evidence in order to hold your ground. That kind of discourse, that kind of westernized notion of what it means to create an argument runs contrary sometimes to First Nation students, to certain gender divides where someone doesn't want to disrespect by disagreeing. And so by promoting one kind of discourse that helps one student is actually contrary to what another student may want to get out of the course. And I'm just wondering, as an instructor then, if you're trying to convince that this is all for you, how do you reconcile those cultural differences and discourse patterns that they bring to the classroom while you're trying to manage it?
Yeah, so I just was asked to share 2 strategies. So these are 2 of them, but we have multiple modalities of actually getting student feedback and engagement if they don't feel comfortable with this strategy. So this is one that we do whole class as a classroom agreement, but there's also check-ins that I do that are more of like an anonymous survey type check-in. And then I also do one-on-one meetings with my students at the beginning to make sure that I recognize and hear their voice. So there's multiple ways. I'm seeing Kimberly's note. I was going to say to the Universal Design for Learning framework. I mean, just that idea of providing, this just one little part of it, but providing multiple options and methods for students to provide voice. But I do, and I will continue doing the class-wide agreements because that is a great place to start getting some clarity and consistency in the language of what's expected. And it's been really effective. And like I said, I really haven't had, I haven't had too many challenges that we can't resolve together in my classroom environment so far. But thanks for the question.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for the question in the chat. And please also feel free to unmute yourself and speak if you would like to. All right, thank you. Nicole, you want to go next?
Sure, and it's a great foundation to jump from. Jess, with her strategies, we share a lot of similarities in that choice UDL, and a lot of getting student feedback and student voice playing a really important role in the classroom. So thanks, Jess. So I picked two strategies that were different ones, so we could have some variety here. That as I was going through online, more and more online settings and virtual settings, of things that just came up as barriers to having it be effective. And I really enjoy running things in a facilitative way. I'm used to going around and coaching more like students, so that it's deepening and giving them opportunities to deepen their thinking through the ways that it's set up. And so my challenge at the beginning, when like last year, was thinking through how to do that in synchronous virtual sessions in a way that was still meaningful and I felt connected. Because what I was finding is I thought I had good structures, and then it was a little clunky online. So I would, I just put, this is just my like thought bubbles, but I found that it was just becoming a challenge, and I was getting called in a lot to the rooms. So basically, first, let me take a step back. The first piece is I was trying out these structured, I was just calling them structured virtual, but knowing that they weren't going to listen to me for 5 hours. Our classes are like 5 hours long, so that wasn't going to work. But they also gave a lot of feedback up front for these certain courses, or the students, that they also didn't want a lot of asynchronous work they were taking through the week, because they're also teaching at the same time. So my audience is graduate level, same as Jess for currently, and many of them are teaching or school counselors or interns as vice principals and such. So I had to think through it and fix it. So the first thing I did was helping visualize processes and concepts, and trying to utilizing digital tools that would help me help them make the process clearer without having to like click a bunch of slides, or I was trying to like draw on my iPad and it just was looking not good. And so the tool I use, there's a lot of different tools. So I'm not like selling a particular tool, but the one that I found a lot of joy with is with Canva, because one, it also is like a well-being piece for me. So it was helping me capture my thinking, but in a little bit, I was feeling artistic. And so it was bringing me some joy through some challenging times. And now they are my whole colleagues in our P12 group are probably done hearing about Canva, but I've had so much fun. So I'm showing you some of my early ones. It's not about how pretty it is for me, but really it's about helping visualize the thinking. Yeah. But I also it was a nice benefit for my well-being and for something that felt fun, because I know like in our group, we like to use a lot of chart paper. I use a whiteboard. Yeah. Jess and I love, like, we have ideas and we're like, oh, let's put it on the whiteboard and chart paper. And I was like missing that piece of my teaching tool. So Canva did that for me in that way. So what I did is to make it visual, well, my realization is that bulleted lists, even in Canvas, and I was really clear, I was just getting called into rooms. Hey, can you re-explain that again? And then it's like clunky, and then I'm over here and then I'm not over here. And I was like, this isn't working. So the two things I found helpful when you're making some kind of visual is to make sure that it shows the steps with the points to remember, so that they can have, they have everything they need when they're working on this like structured asynchronous time.
Yeah.
So like the questions are answered for them. And then also to show the purpose and process of the collaborative task, because even though I made some assumptions like, oh, they're teachers, so they've done fish bowls before.
Totally, yeah.
And yes, they had, but they did not transfer to the virtual space when I let them go. Like, and so that was a really interesting kind of phenomenon that I found. So the two examples here I have, and you should know too, on an aside, there's a lot of text. So although I didn't have, we do learner profiles, so I didn't have anyone that needed the assistance of the screen reader. I was aware of that. And I did though type all anything time there was text, I put it as the alt text. So that it would be for later down the road. But so I'm just gonna honor that component. But I wanted to show, if you can, Trang, the examples, just so it makes clear kind of what, again, I'm the visual anyways. So the one is the Trang, example one, where it's like kind of teal with the pink little boxes. Yeah, that one.
This one, the example.
Yeah, so that was just to show a process of their coaching conversation for their post conversation. I think when you guys get the link to this, you can.
Yeah, you can.
But just to show like their content was a process, and I had a model. I also modeled with a student so they could see it. But when I released them, I wanted them to be able to work on and do it and go practice. So we had already seen one in action, and we analyzed it through the lens of our rubrics for our work. And then I wanted to give them a tool, because as a beginning coach, there's a lot of layers to think about, and actually got tons of good feedback. And I know that I'll keep this for whether it's face-to-face or not. The other one was my little fishbowl. And it was reminding them of when I broke them out into 3, like what they're doing in each part and what they should be looking for and what the observer should be looking for. And again, they used the tool. They gave me thumbs up. Yeah, we use this in our classrooms as teachers, but not in virtual spaces. And when I released them, so this was really helpful. And in the end, I put some points to remember. It saves time. There's more time in the learning and less time of me jumping around. And then we had more meaningful discussion when they get back. So it was less about getting stuck in the weeds and getting into the learning. So that was my first one. The second one is, after doing this, I got wise to, let's see, keep going down. It's the next thought bubble.
This one, right?
Nope, it's a branch back. So, so once I realized that visual thing, then I had my aha, which was just facilitating and monitoring these collaborative spaces, and how to like do the coaching thing myself as the facilitator to get the thinking going in particular aspects, but I wanted them to construct and do their learning. So so what I did then is I realized the same thing. I wanted to be able to give them everything they needed. So when I released them, they had an hour and a half, 90 minutes, whatever it was, their group knew their roles, again, based in previous working agreements, but for the task at hand, right? Like knew what their roles would be. I gave, so that they're not messing around with timers. I built in and embedded timers so that they could function and do their stuff. Like if they're going to read, they're going to discuss. I gave them their prompt questions, and I tried to integrate some tools then that were collaborative, where I was trying to go into everyone's room, and I realized that wasn't working very well because it's too clunky. And then if someone needs help, I'm not there. So I started then adding the layer of a collaborative space. So they're in their virtual rooms doing their discussions, whatever they're doing, and they're putting their ideas onto something that's updating real time. So whether it's Jamboard, I've used Padlet in the same way, you just have to refresh your screen. You can do like Google Docs and slides, but I like Jamboard better because it didn't like push them down, and I gave them some more frames. But so for Jamboard, I'd go in and put a sticky note, seeing what the group might be doing. And then I'd put a little note like to extend their thinking, or to show me how are you discussing, how are these making sense to you? How can you visually explain what you mean here? How do these ideas connect? So I do like little coaching stickies which was starting to work like how I would be in class.
In the worry of sticky notes anymore.
I know, and I love they, you know, and it's not about looking pretty or anything. It's about demonstrating thinking, right? Making their thinking visible and like as if I was listening in on them. And then anyway, I found that those structures help, again, increase instructional time for them, and so that they are in the thinking, but that I could still do my coaching facilitating piece as they construct knowledge and work through things. So yeah, and then the other pictures just show how I build in the in the timer. And I like this, my motto. This is my first time. I don't know if I spelled it right, but I think this could do something similar in those spaces, because like last night, Tring, you were on, and I saw you on there, and anyway. So that's
cool.
Kind of.
Yeah, Nicole, I've been Padlet. I love
grappling
too. Just for me, like sticky note Padlets are really very impactful, low resolution kind of techniques. Yeah, they're just simple and just work. MyDomo, yeah. So if you like to co-create, collaborate with the student, or give assignments for the student to create together or individually, I pay the $8 per month for the subscription, and it allows up to 75 students and with unlimited maps. So together, I think $30 for 6 months, not bad for a semester. VoiceThread is another tool that I use to kind of recruit the students inside as well. And so speaking up, we have the link to this MyDomo on the chat that Jessica just posted. So please feel free to access and add to the map as you wish, right? So the idea of this is we built this whole map by Kremen team. It's not limited to me, not limited to only the 4 speakers here. You all have the same access and build. So please join us and do so. And thank you, Nicole. That's such a wonderful sharing. Any questions for Nicole on the chat, or please feel unmute yourself. Thanks, Masha. Yes, you can just log in to this one. All right. So with that, Masha, would you like to go next and share your thoughts?
Yes. All right. So
here we go.
We were asked to consider what 2 major things that we consider when we create active learning. And as I was reflecting on my practices, the 2 steps that I saw I have been doing were related to what is happening before the course starts and what is happening as the course goes, so during the course. Therefore, my first point is related to incorporating active learning principles in the course design. And I call it course design, but this could also be considered as course planning. In a way, active learning could be defined through various ways. For example, a constructivism approach defines active learning through learning by doing. And that's one of the principles through which I design my courses. I engage my students in doing, engaging, and learning through those processes. Applied learning is another principle as well in active learning. Ultimately, it is about connecting students' prior knowledge with what we learn. And in other words, it's incorporating the principles of constructivism. Yet, this is not the only approach that can be incorporated during the course planning phase. For example, there are problem-based learning approaches, project-based learning approaches, game-based approaches, simulation-based approaches. Those all pedagogical approaches that increase active learning of students. As I will go through the points that I use in my class, I incorporate mostly constructivism approach and learning by doing. Before I even start engaging with planning my course or designing my course, I really reflect and consider my audience, who my students are and what their needs are. And I'm really thinking about their needs, not just during their graduate education, but also what's happening with them beyond graduation, what kind of skills and competencies they need in order to be more successful at their jobs. I teach master's and doctoral students, and those two types of students are a bit different, and their needs are also different, so I consider those things. First of all, I emphasize applied nature of the course. I connect course signature assignment with the real life, and I push students towards connecting what we learn with the real life in which they live, achieve, and perform and work. I also clearly consider individual versus group assignments, and if those are group assignments, I clearly outline student roles and allow them engage in group projects in a way that would diminish free riders, because I know that's one of the critiques of group projects that I've heard from our students. So I do my best to diminish and providing more facilitation in terms of how they can structure work, so that each student knows what it is that they are responsible for in the group project. And the group can still be successful even if one of the students chooses to not participate in a timely manner. Second, I emphasize transfer of knowledge. It's important for me that the courses that I teach don't just stand on its own, but that they are connected within the context of other courses that students engage in and within the context of the program in which they study. And that's because I teach both students in education and students in counseling. I also emphasize taking one step at a time. And from my personal experience, that is how large tasks can be achieved in a less overwhelmed manner. So I break the final project into smaller pieces, and I work students focusing on one piece at a time. At the same time, I incorporate peer review and revision assignments, so that each student can engage in each piece of the final project and kind of bring it a level higher, so that by the end of the semester, what they have produced is of better quality. All right, so my second, and those things are all happening at the phase of designing or planning the course, when I'm thinking about what I will be doing during the course. So the second point is related to what is happening during the course. And ultimately, with the curriculum there, with the content there, what is most important during the course is connecting with students. Given our students' voice is one of the most important things that I focused, especially during this academic year, during the current context, because that can be very difficult in Zoom format. I learned that group discussions take much time, and while I can jump from one group to the other group, it does take more time for me to visit each group than it would have in physical classroom. Therefore, I stepped away from those practices, and instead I started incorporating other ways that could allow my students to bring voice to the classroom, as well as connect with everyone else in a way that would foster their well-being. Okay. One of the things that I started incorporating, and that actually comes from Kimberly Coy. At the beginning of this academic year, we had a meeting with faculty, and Kimberly brought up an idea of sharing answers to the question, what is one thing you are grateful for today? And as she asked this question, she also asked us to share this through camel style. So it's hashtag and then all words, don't use any space. And that's how we provided our responses. Here's an example how Kimberly gave it to us. And then you would provide response using camel style.
Yeah.
This happened during the same day that when I was teaching my course. So I really liked this idea, and I brought this idea into my classroom, and I used this as a warm-up activity. And this gave voice to each single one of my students. So what I started doing during that class in fall, I asked a new question each week that I met with students as our warm-up activity. Because my research, I'm very passionate in the area of positive psychology and mental skills training from sports psychology. I drew on these content areas to come up with questions and incorporate additional things that can help students pause, reflect on where we are at the moment, and focus on positive aspects regardless of what is happening outside in the world. And that really helped them come down and engage with the class.
Yeah.
And through these practices, I would also share my, my responses as well. And sometimes some responses were dorky, and I was fine about it. And I would share that, yes, I do enjoy engaging with statistical analysis. This is who I am, and that is absolutely fine. And I would also read their responses through the chat. And depending on the responses, sometimes we would engage in a little bit additional conversations. Some of the questions that I asked during that semester with that class was, when do you experience being in the zone, which is also referred as a flow? If you're fully present for a few moments, what do you notice? What is 1 or 2 or 3 positive self-talk affirmation messages that you would create for yourself to boost your confidence that can be placed in a spot where you frequently see, such as a car, a bathroom mirror, or things like that? So these activities set a tone for the beginning of the class and warm students up. And after warm-up activity, we were engaged in our content. This also created a sort of ritual that could build the community. In my face-to-face classes, I also had certain rituals, but I thought that I would share what I've been doing in the current context. Ultimately, because much or a big chunk of my research interest are focused on sense of purpose in life, I do like incorporating these ideas in my classroom as well.
Yeah, thank you, Masha, for wonderful sharing. I would say that I attended your sense of purpose presentations for the Provo series, and I could totally see like how you incorporate how it's really meant very well to this one. So thank you for sharing it in both places. Yeah, I might want to share one thing is, yeah, in my classroom, I also kind of, lead the student into a very relaxing, like starting of the class, like playing some jazz music in the background and have a cup of tea or coffee like in the background for them, just so that they can enjoy the first 10 minutes before the class time and encourage questions and share something that you did during the weekend, something fun, and give like a 5 seconds pause for the student to share. So that's a technique I've been learning throughout the way. One thing I would like to share, like from the previous panel with the student, is a doctoral student said that in her class, Valerie really posed this slide and asked the student how are they doing. And this, the student will share like they're doing good, fine. And the second slide, she would go, how are you actually doing? And that brain brought a lot of like very close up sharing, even tears, and very personal, like, open up. So Thank you for this, Masha. I think together with that, we kind of have examples of like how to do it on text and how to do it conversational. Yeah.
And you're welcome. Just to add, a couple years ago, I took a course that is offered within our grammar school. Yeah. It was Counseling 200. And it also introduced me to a few ideas that could be incorporated in classes. And I'm just seeing the chat and how we can acknowledge students' feelings and make those feelings valid, because those feelings are valid. At the same time, depending on the position of power and what it is that you're focusing on, teaching versus making administrative decisions, there are different constraints within which we function.
Masha, I don't know if you saw Randy's question for you on the chat.
Yeah, so Masha, I'm not really speaking necessarily about administrative, right? What I am actually speaking about is that students, that every discourse is impacted by not just the participants, but the constructed discourse in that context. And every discourse has multiple agendas that people are trying to both learn about and master for their own benefits. And we've seen this, not just in our classrooms, but we've seen it even recently where students are saying, I want a live face-to-face ceremony. I want to walk the stage. Mm-hmm. And our administration, including myself, have not been necessarily good leaders in how you manage multiple agendas within a common discourse. So I just want to hear about your kind of positioning within these instances. If you can take a real instance, that'd be great. If you want to make one up, that's okay too. But giving voice is not as simplistic as some people make it out to be. So could you talk about that just a bit?
It's not simplistic, and this is why it's good to create the boxes, the constraints within which they offer their voices. For example, I was doing it in the course by specifying the question by the question, right? If I'm asking what brings joy to your life, that is the box that I set. With your question, I don't have an answer. And that I feel like it's, as I mentioned before, it's a little bit different from making administrative decisions versus teaching in the classroom. Those are different levels of the context within which voices could be allowed to be shared.
Well, if I could maybe follow up, Masha, an example, a real simple example then would be the negotiation that John Goodlad described that happens in the finding the minimum, right? How American schools are set up for students and teachers to negotiate the minimum. Do we have to do this? Is it going to be graded? Those kinds of questions put you in a position where you have to decide as a person of power what to expect. And so in these multiple agendas, I still want to hear about how you navigate those as an instructor.
If I understand your question correctly, and maybe I misunderstand it, also realizing that I am teaching methodological courses, statistics, research design, program evaluation, measurement. Those are different courses than teaching the content courses. But some of those constraints happen at the pre-course level, right? When we plan the course and when we design the course. Just thinking about assignments, I can provide students voice in terms of what assignments to engage, the topic, different types of assignments. I am the one who is deciding how much freedom or how wide the box to set.
Exactly. So Masha, somebody says, I think the best solution to this is a quantitative study that demonstrates in a survey that blah, blah, blah. And you may say as an instructor, no, this is a qualitative question. You can't answer the question you're asking using that method. You have a call that you make as an instructor in a position of power. And Susan, you might want to speak to this as well. But I find it non-trivial that we in a position of power want to both honor the voice and the choices of students and at the same time exert our power as experts for the benefit of the entire class.
Right, and it's we as faculty members of our classroom, we need to facilitate and lead our students, right? Right now I'm thinking about my 7-year-old. Yes, he wants to do many things. Maybe not all those things are beneficial for him. So as a parent, I can lead him and sway him towards certain things. In a way, that's what we also do in our classrooms.
I'm sorry to be so persistent. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. And I see there is chat happening, but
there's a lot going on there. So anyone feel free to unmute yourself and elaborate, or if you have questions, feel free. We have a couple more minutes for Marcia's section.
Yeah, if you don't mind if I follow up. One of the things that I've been thinking about in this last exchange is that within a classroom, we set up constraints in order to help students learn. You know, it's a scaffolded experience, but eventually we want them to be able to be reflective on what they learn within the classroom and be able to adapt and apply outside the classroom. So I'm just wondering, you know, in the context of some of the discussion that we've had about the tension between the position of power that the instructor holds as opposed to the voice and the the needs of the learners within the classroom. Eventually we want to upend that dynamic and empower the learner to make use of what we teach in the ways that make sense to them.
Absolutely. And that definitely also depends how to do it and how it's done. It depends on the class and class content area. I've been thinking about it for a number of semesters, just teaching methodological courses. I used to open my first class with asking students to introduce themselves and ask them why they were in my class. 29 out of 30 would tell me because I have to. So, you know, I stopped asking that question, and instead I started incorporating assignments that would allow students to make their own, to kind of come to the realization of the utility of the usefulness of the class. And that can be done through multiple ways. For example, I've done reflection diaries in my statistics courses. So my statistics courses included computer labs, but I also incorporated those reflective activities in which I explicitly ask students to reflect and share how they see the application of what we learned within a certain unit in their professional context. And that was very interesting to read because many students were making those connections.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, instructors also need to be vulnerable. I absolutely agree with this because that helps students connect with the instructor and see instructor as a person. And that helps build trust. And this is why that was one of the reasons why I also shared my own answers to all the positive psychology questions, because then we could share and create this community where we all were expressing things that very dear to who we really are.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcia, for your wonderful sharings and for the questions in the chat and audio questions. So, and it's still happening on the chat. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I don't have that much time, so I'll try and be kind of quick here. And I want to mention that I think what I've done here is to actually pick out some examples instead of talking about general principles. But what I will say in terms of general principles of teaching and setting up my class, I teach almost exclusively statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past several years, I have taught only online. It's been a number of years since I have a face-to-face. And I feel like as a statistics instructor, that one of my main goals is to reduce fear. Because a lot of times students come into class basically terrified. I actually had one student one time come into class and her knees were literally knocking against each other. She was so terrified. And I remember when I gave her back her first test, we don't give tests anymore, but she passed it and she just literally broke down and sobbed because she just couldn't believe that she could pass a statistics test.
Mm-hmm.
So, reducing fear is a lot of what I do. And so what I have done to do this is to try to set up situations where students actually talk. Because a lot of times, and it's much easier to see this face to face, like you'll say something, you'll ask a question and students will be like, you know, they don't want to make eye contact with you. They don't want to be called on. They have this tremendous fear of being wrong. And that's an embarrassing position to be in. So what I try to do is I try to set up topics or situations. And I used to have people work in groups and I used to have them post things on discussion boards and people were supposed to respond. Sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. And then I'd give points for it. And then, you know, that just seemed punitive after a while. And so I don't do any of that stuff anymore. So I just set up, now in the online environment, I set up rooms and I give them a assignment and they have to talk because they're in just a small group and it's structured. For example, one of the things I have them do is to come up with, I did this a couple of weeks ago, where they had to give examples of categorical, continuous, and blocked variables. For some reason, I find that students have a hard time distinguishing between different types of variables, and unless you know what your variables are like, you don't really know what statistical technique to use. So I just put up a thing, Google Docs, and they had to say what the variables were and give examples. And then we talked about a blocked variable where we take a continuous variable, segmented into ranges of scores. For example, we take income and then we block it into low, medium, and high income. And so that led to a good discussion about, well, where do we set the cut points? And this was, I think it helped the students, and students came up with several examples. So we actually had a lively discussion of this, and I think this helps. I'm in an 8-week class, so I'm kind of at the beginning of it. It's helpful for them to progress through the rest of the semester. The other things I do is, first of all, we talk about, I have things set up where they talk about what variables are, how they're measured, and so on, and get a very strong sense of that. Have them give examples of very quick, short examples where they say, for example, an independent t-test, what's the research question? What are the variables that you would use? And then the next group assignment, which they have to present, is to design a research study. And so they have to say, you know, what are the research questions, the variables, who are the participants, what analysis will they do, what do they expect to get? And I used to give scenarios where they could pick among several scenarios and then suggest an analysis for that scenario. But I've switched it to letting them pick their own. And I found this to be a better way to do it because they have more freedom in terms of picking things that are of interest to them. And the way I've set it up now, and it's on Google Docs, but I think I'm gonna switch to Padlet because I just think that's gonna be a better way to do it. Anyway, they have to come up with this research design. Mm-hmm. They get 4 slides, and so they have to be, and one is gonna be a title page. So they have to be very concise. I have made my assignments so they're much less writing assignments and more, I'm supposed to be someplace else now. Anyway, so that it makes them talk with each other about it, because I think if you sit back and you don't interact, you're never going to get it. It gives them freedom to create, pick what they want to study. But then they also have to have a good grounding in what the content is, because there's certain content that I want them to get. The other thing I do, and we did this last night, we were talking about hypothesis testing. And I was saying, well, this is the null hypothesis. And several students said, oh no, I have it all wrong because I thought it was something else. And they say what they think it was. And I said, well, look at the knowledge that you have, because what they were saying was they thought the hypothesis was actually the alternate. So I try and normalize the process and say, you really have the concept down, because if you didn't, what you really hope to find is the alternate. Now we're just going to tweak your use of the language a little bit. So then I'm validating them for having knowledge, which they didn't think it was possible even for them to have any knowledge of statistics to start out with. But then, so that reduces the fear, but then I also tweak it a little bit so that they can be more accurate in their presentation of this knowledge at later points. So I think in the interest of time, any questions,
Thank you, Susan. That was great. And thank you for the very detailed illustration and explanation. Question for Susan? Again, the chat is very engaging here. Sorry, I had to say that I got distracted a bit checking both. Yeah, again, questions. I know that some of us are crunched on time, and Jessica and Nicole had to go for their student meeting, but yeah, we are still here. If you can spare some more minutes and to continue this discussion or wrap it up.
Thank you, Trang. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah.
If you need a template or anything, if you're interested, let me know. I have the respect agreement type contract and the empathy interview templates.
Okay, great. Thank you. Maybe you would like to share that on the map as well, and people have access.
Oh, okay, maybe I could send you a link to add. Or
yeah, and I'll add to it. Perfect. Yeah, anything that you guys want to share and want to add, let me know. Just share. Thank you everyone for joining today.
Yes, thank you very much too.
Leave. All right.
Thank you, Trang, for setting up the opportunity.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna run because they're coming to the other Zoom room.
Yeah, I know everyone is so busy. Okay, thank you, everyone.
I just want to make a quick statement to Kathy left. Okay, well, I guess I won't. Yeah. You guys, I gotta run. I'll see you later.
All right, happy
spring, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Happy Friday. Bye. And have a good spring break. Thank you, Trang.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.